G'day everyone, this Power Untamed build can do up to 18k solo DPS and maintain all your offensive boons whilst healing yourself for an insane amount. It's my personal favourite open world build, which I use to regularly solo legendary bounties and anything else I come across. I made an earlier version of this build in a previous video, but I've made some changes since Secrets of the Obscure and it's only gotten better. So let's dive into the updated build. Firstly, what changed with Secrets of the Obscure? Well, the healing component of the natural fortitude trait was buffed by a significant amount, which just makes us heal even more than we already did. But the main thing that has shaken up the build is the relics and runes overhaul that came with Secrets of the Obscure. Specifically, we lost the boon proc from Rune of the Fireworks, so I've introduced Spirits and the Warhorn into this updated version to sustain our boons. These are the specializations I recommend. The Untamed and Skirmishing trait lines are pretty standard, no change from the last video. However, I've started using Nature Magic instead of Marksmanship. Because the build is now using Spirits, Nature's Vengeance synergizes really nicely with enhancing impact because Storm Spirit slams a second time and therefore triggering quickness twice. The raw concentration stats that Lingering Magic gives us equates to damage because we can take more Berserker gear. And don't underestimate the surprising amount of value that Fortifying Bond has both defensively and offensively. It's actually a really decent damage boost because your pet is benefiting from all the might, quickness and fury. With all this and running Storm Spirit, Nature Magic was actually pulling in front of Marksmanship in my testing, and it also makes your pet significantly more survivable by sharing protection and regen with it. I use mostly Berserker's gear with some Diviner's trinkets for boon uptime. I recommend aiming for around 40 to 50% boon duration, which will make it easier to reliably sustain your might, fury and quickness, which is really important for solo damage. For runes, I use the Scholar. If you don't have much Diviner's gear, you can use Rune of the Pack to get some more boon duration. Sigils of Force and Strength should be your go-to. However, you can replace Force with Concentration to help with boon uptime if needed. Don't replace Strength though, 25 stacks of Might is too valuable. Celestial gear can be swapped in if you find yourself struggling to survive. It's a viable alternative that will give you less damage, but you'll be super tanky, so it will be more forgiving. For the new relic slot, I've been using Relic of the Thief, which is just a flat 5% strike damage if you keep your weapon abilities rolling. For weapons, my personal favourite is still Double Axe, but with Warhorn in the offhand now for boon sustainment. The might generation from Axe 1 is significant, and the Axe's Unleash Ambush, Sundering Volley, is just incredible, hitting 5 targets in any direction with solid damage, bleeding, vulnerability and immobilize. It's still the main reason I love the Axe so much. Warhorn 5 gives a huge boon generator for Might and Fury, which is the main reason we take it. But it's also a daze, so it does proc quickness too. Warhorn 4 helps with vulnerability uptime and does decent damage. If you really want a melee option though, you can use the sword with the Warhorn, which is also a very strong option. I just personally prefer the quality of life of being ranged for solo open world content. I've added Storm Spirit into this build as I mentioned, which does a solid hit of damage, dazes the enemy proccing quickness, applies 10 stacks of vulnerability and about 10 seconds of fury. Even better is that with Nature Magic, the slam will hit a second time a few seconds later, doing more damage and proccing a second instance of quickness, so this skill is really valuable. Exploding Spores is still taken for the might and protection it generates, as well as a knockdown proccing more quickness if all the spores hit. So care should be taken to drop this right underneath the enemy's hitbox. Quickening Zephyr is great offensively for more quickness, or just to keep as a stun break, and Forest's Fortification is just a massive defensive. If you don't want the extra defensive, you can take Strength of the Pack for more boon uptime. My favourite pets to use are the Rock Gazelle, Jacaranda or Smoke Scale, all of which have a decent mix of damage, survivability and CC. For open world content, I won't break down the rotation into a specific order of all skills, because I think it's unrealistic and just simply unnecessary. Instead, you should follow a general priority, which is the following. Axe 3 followed by your ambush sequence every 10 seconds should always be your highest priority, because this is what will keep you alive. Restorative Strikes has an internal cooldown of 10 seconds, so rather than trying to keep track of this or just doing it randomly, I recommend you build the habit that every time Axe 3 is off cooldown, because it's also 10 seconds, you immediately follow it with your ambush sequence, which should look like this. Axe 3, then unleash your pet. This will trigger the Restorative Strikes window. Use the pet 1, 2, 3 in quick succession, and then immediately unleash back to the ranger and use the ambush skill, Sundering Volley, which will hit in the last second or two of your Restorative Strikes window, and this is what will do the insane healing that tops your health bar every 10 seconds. Axe 2 should be your second priority above anything else, because it's a solid part of your damage, but it's also the lowest cooldown, and therefore delaying it wastes the most DPS relatively. But more importantly, using this on cooldown will also keep your Relic of the Thief rolling at 5 stacks. And then just use everything else as it comes off cooldown. swapping weapons every time you use your 5th weapon skill. If you want a more detailed discussion on restorative strikes, watch the rotations section of my previous build video, which I've linked in the card above. Throughout the video, you would have seen me soloing various legendary bounties and tough enemies like the Mushroom Queen. But to demonstrate this build's potential even more, I did some golem testing with moderate environmental damage on. As you can see, the moderate damage is ticking me down fairly fast, but every 10 seconds I execute the ambush sequence and it fully heals me. You'll also notice I maintain 25 stacks of might fairly consistently, 100% fury uptime, and nearly 100% quickness uptime, which is really significant for a solo build. At the end of this golem test, you'll see that I do 18k damage with no external boons whilst healing myself through some fairly considerable and consistent damage. So if you enjoyed the build, please like and subscribe, it helps out a lot. Thanks for listening, cheers.